Hi, everybody. I'm Sam Tabbert with Living Spinal, and this is the first of many team trainings that we're going to do. Today's topic is seating and positioning, part 1, where we're going to be going through the basics of seating and positioning for DME providers and cushions. So none of us are healthcare providers here. We sell these supplies, and it's important that we know about the cushions and the technologies of them and when they should be used, right? So we can get the best possible product to our customer who needs it. So I have my team with me here. I'm going to be doing a training with them, and they're going to be fielding questions as we go. So really the most basic principle of seating and positioning is biomechanical principles that are applied to a wheelchair seating in order to customize a wheelchair to a person. So there's a lot of technology in all these cushions, and really each customer, there is a right cushion for them, and it's our job to get them that right cushion. So there's general and specific goals of seating and positioning, and you kind of want to keep these in mind when you're talking to someone and trying to figure out what cushion is best for them. So general goals we have are achieving a stable sitting posture, maximizing contact area of the skin to minimize pressure, optimizing friction for stability without excessive shear. And all shear is literally this. When you have something that presses against your skin and then pulls it. And you can prevent that with all different kinds of materials that cushions and cushion covers are made of. And we'll get into that a little bit later. Controlling heat and moisture with adequate ventilation. There's a lot of different technologies that do that. Correcting postural issues if possible. Maximizing user perceived comfort. So for a lot of people, they're going to call and just say, I want the most comfortable cushion possible. You don't have to worry about any of this stuff. And we have solutions for that too. Maximize user dynamic control over movement with as little restriction as possible. So we'll talk about that as well in how a contoured cushion that's great for all things, all different reasons may not be best for somebody who wants to be able to turn around and move and reach down. So then more specific goals of seating and positioning is we want to prevent people from sliding out of their wheelchair or excessive leaning to one side, which can happen with air cushions sometimes, and we'll talk about that. Increase the ability to do functional tasks while sitting, provide supportive surfaces, and obviously the big one that you're going to hear a lot is decreasing skin breakdown. So preventing pressure sores, pressure ulcers. I want to remind you guys that just remember not to try and create the impression with customers that we're a healthcare provider. That we're a supplier of these cushions, and we can't make them recommendations within the realm of medicine. Best questions you can ask people are questions like, has your occupational therapist or your physical therapist made any recommendations to you? That's a good one to ask right away, because sometimes people won't even bring it up. And after a long time of talking to them, they'll say, oh, but my PT recommended this one. It's like, well, that's the one they should go with. There's off-the-shelf products, and then there's modified off-the-shelf products, and then there's fully custom products. So an off-the-shelf product, pretty self-explanatory. It's an 18 by 18 basic cushion that can be pulled off the shelf in a Roho warehouse and shipped right to our customer. A modified off-the-shelf product might be a hybrid cushion, where it's something that they stock, but before they ship it, they put a gel pad in it. Or something like a cushion that might have a relief section for the coccyx. So your coccyx is right here at the bottom of your tailbone. It's the lowermost point of your spine. And a lot of cushions have little cutouts for it because people tend to sit on it. They call it sacral sitting. A modified off-the-shelf cushion might have a cutout for that. And when it's about to be shipped, they'll put in a special air section or a special gel section, and we'll ship that out the door. You get that a lot. And you'll see that in our option sets on our website. People can select an option for the cushion and have it shipped out. And then there's fully custom products. And you'll find that cushions can have order forms that are just as complicated as wheelchair order forms. It may be a slight exaggeration, but they can be very complicated. Some questions we want to ask our clients when we're talking to them on phone calls and chatting with them. Really, right away, I think the best question to ask people is, can you tell me a little bit about your disability? when you ask them that question, a lot of times it's a more comfortable question to ask. It lets people kind of start at their own pace and tell you, well, I'm a C3 spinal paralysis incomplete. And you can say, well, can you tell me a little bit more about that? Can you tell me how much abdominal stability you have? How easy is it for you to sit upright in your chair? And you can ask them, you can also ask them, what kind of cushions have you had in the past? Have you had contoured cushions in the past? Is there a brand you prefer? You can ask them, can you sit upright on your own? Do you have a preference? Is there a type you've always used? Because you might go down, way down a rabbit hole of foam cushions, and then, they say, well, I've never really used those and I don't really like them and I've always used Roho. And it's like, okay, well, I got to completely change gears here. So I like to ask a lot of questions and get a really good feel. And I keep a little notepad in front of me and just make a lot of little notes. So you can get kind of a little profile for that person when you're trying to pick it out. Most of our clients are going to be within these few disabilities. And Andrew, you can chime in if you think of any I missed here. Spina Bifida causes lower extremity paralysis and some other things. Non-ambulatory elderly clients, they have specific needs and cushions. So spinal paralysis, it's important to know the different levels of spinal paralysis. You don't have to memorize it. Just get a basic chart that explains it. I have one on my desk wall right next to my computer, and I can print one out for you and make it available to you guys as well. You just look right at your chart and go scroll right down, C6, C7. That means that they usually are quadriplegic, usually have difficulty with hand and wrist and finger function, and sometimes they have abdominal issues. Cerebral palsy it affects most people differently. But there's a couple different indications of these types of disabilities that are really important when you're picking out a cushion or a backrest for somebody. For example, there is an ailment called spasticity, and that just means muscle stiffness. And generally what that means is they have a hard time moving if they can move at all. And they're always having tightening and stiff muscles. And if it's in their legs and in their quads and they're sitting, that can cause shearing. Remember I talked about shearing. So if you get somebody and they say, oh, I have cerebral palsy, you can say, well, do you ever see any spasticity in your legs? Or have you ever had issues with your skin being sheared on your cushions? And then you can look into different covers for that. So up next, pressure ulcers. They can be very dangerous. They can cost between $15,000 and $60,000 just to heal one. And they have even worse social and psychological effects on people. And they're also very painful and they're limiting to day-to-day life. So obviously there's a lot of motivation for people to heal pressure ulcers. They want to get rid of them as fast as possible and they want to prevent them. And seating and positioning is really, it's the first line of defense, I guess. So you'll talk about that a lot. You'll hear people a lot say, oh yeah, I've had a pressure ulcer. And immediately if you hear them say, oh, I've had a pressure ulcer, there's cushions you should consider and cushions you shouldn't consider. The risks of getting one, generally people who sit for more than 4 hours, so people in wheelchairs, inability to self-position, and people with impaired sensation. So a lot of people with spinal paralysis don't have sensation in their legs. And if they start getting pressure, they can't feel it. So a lot of times they don't know until it's too late. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
So if they do have a pressure ulcer, like what would you recommend, like the top offer to them if they have it?
Generally, an air cushion is best, but gel and fluid cushions are good too. We'll get into it. We're going to start talking about the different types of cushions and which ones work better for existing and people with history. So some more specific risks is heat and moisture. And then others, incontinence, not being able to control urine. Older age, existing infection, so an infection anywhere in the body. So day to day, we run into seats and backrests a lot, but the armrests and chair height and those other metrics generally are going to come with custom wheelchair fitting, which eventually we're going to get you into, Jake.
Awesome.
Cool. So that is the introduction. Any questions so far? Nothing? All right, moving on. So now we're going to talk specifically about wheelchair seat cushions and the different metrics of cushions and how to pick the right cushion for a customer. Cushion contour. So we have a contoured cushion versus a non-contoured or a flat cushion. The difference is a contoured cushion is going to be more tailored to a person. So it has a formed shape. You can kind of see it here. You can see it there. Yeah, that's much easier. You guys can see that. The formed shape is going to assist with postural support. So how people sit upright in their chair. It's going to allow for more pressure relief, and especially in the coccyx and other areas. And it's going to fit better to the person, allowing for more pressure redistribution. And it also allows for multiple different types of materials to be used. So you might be thinking, like, how does a contour allow for more pressure relief? And it's easiest to show you in a picture here. Because there's more of your surface area touching a contoured cushion, it allows for more pressure relief. So if you see here on a flat cushion, the bottoms of their buttocks there are just pressing straight down into the flat portion of the cushion. But in the contoured cushion, the contours allow for the pressure of your legs to push all the way through this contour here. So it actually allows for more pressure relief. So generally, if somebody has issues with pressure sores and they need more postural support, a contoured cushion is the better way to go.
What's the purpose of having a non-contour?
Good question. And there are benefits. I mean, talking about the contour, it sounds like, oh, that sounds great. Why aren't all cushions contoured? Well, there's benefits of a non-contour. And the benefits are, one, they allow for more freedom of movement. So if you're sitting in a contoured cushion, it's harder to move around, reach, grab things, and just be mobile. So actually, most wheelchair users prefer a flat cushion. And also, a flat cushion just fits everybody. They pretty much most flat cushions are off-the-shelf cushions, so anybody can buy it, sit in it, and it'll usually work well for them. So contours are just more specific.
Is it easier to transfer on one of them? Like, is a non-contour compared to a contour? Is it easier to transfer on a flat?
It's a good question.
So
Andrew can probably chime in. I think it is easier to do on a flat because there's nothing that can catch you.
The activity level of the customer. Okay. If someone and their amount of disability, if they're elderly or maybe quite able-bodied, or they're, they're just like really active, then they're going to have enough. A lot of it too is also like the amount of circulation that's going on in the body. Okay, so if you have a ton of circulation and you're really active and ambulatory and you're moving around and you're using your wheelchair part-time or whatever, because you have MS or something else that, like, you have times when you really need it, but then you're walking sometimes or whatever, those people could totally handle a flat cushion and be really active and make it easier maybe to transfer and whatnot. But if it's someone with a spinal cord injury and they have lower circulation because, their whole lower section is usually not working at some point, it's going to be much better to be in a contour cushion. because it's going to protect them more from the pressure sore. That's what it's really all about, because you get a pressure sore, you're now laid up in bed for 4 to 6 months, most likely.
Yeah.
I mean, can you imagine in your life to all of a sudden just be like, you're going to lay in bed and turn every so often? So that's the real fear, you know, and that's why it's serious for us to want to make sure we get people the best cushions. And there are some really high-end cushions that we recommend that are, you know, they're $400 cushions. They are the best out there, and they're going to help people. And so you kind of need to encourage people to go towards some of those, unfortunately, more expensive cushions, but it's going to protect them better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, on a side note, I've had people call and say, I just want the cheapest cushion for my client.
Yeah.
But I think they're just, because the client's saying, I can only spend this amount of money.
Right.
And then they're not going to get the one that they would really work best for them.
Right.
And, you know, there are different situations where people are maybe purchasing for others. And you just need to try to learn as much as you can, like Sam said, about the client and try to get them in the right cushion.
Cushion profile is the height of the cushion. Okay. So that's literally how tall the cushion is. Generally, across most brands, they're going to do a minimum, a mid, and a high profile cushion. So the mid is usually about 2 inches. Most people assume that a wheelchair cushion is going to be 2 inches high. Then the minimum is going to be anywhere from 2 inches to 0. And then the high profile is usually about 4 inches. 4 inches, maybe slightly less. 4 inches is pretty tall. The Rojos are all right at 4 inches. So it depends on the brand, but this is really, really important. I mean, cushion profile can, if you change it on someone, you have to understand that it's going to change a lot about how they sit in their wheelchair. Let's say you go higher. They're going to be sitting up in their chair more, so their feet aren't going to touch the footrest like they used to. Also, their backrest is going to sit lower on their back, and that can even cause a pressure sore because it may press them differently, especially if they have a backrest that comes around them and provides some kind of lateral support, which a lot of people do. But it's just really good to disclose that their wheelchair might fit them differently if they want to change the profile. So if you're talking to them, it's a good thing to say, well, how tall is your current cushion? And if they say 2 inches, you know that they probably have a mid-profile cushion. And if you guys are looking at a high-profile cushion, just tell them, hey, because we're going a little taller, you might fit in your wheelchair a little bit differently. And you can also just tell them, if they have a high degree of disability and it seems like they're really it may affect them a lot, you can say, well, maybe it's best to talk to your physical therapist.
Yeah. But if the cushion goes up, the footrest goes up, and the backrest goes up, and then there's positioned the same.
Yeah.
So
well,
you can
and also there's
help
armrests. Armrests may have to go up or down too. And then also it does affect other things too. Like it affects how they reach their hand rooms and push their hand rooms. Even if it does so marginally, for some people that's important. I did have one customer where we changed his armrest height, and he had Navi 1s, and he was pretty weak. He got Navi 1s because it was hard for him to push, and just that slight change in where his elbows were, it was harder for him to push his rims. So we had to return it and do a different profile cushion. Not everyone's going to be like that. That's an extreme case, but it can happen. So briefly, we'll go through the different types of cushions now. It's really easy to say, oh, there's 5 types of cushions, there's 3 types of cushions, but there's a lot of types of cushions. In general, there's air cushions, gel cushions, fluid cushions, foam cushions, hybrid cushions, which just means a combination of any of those. And then there's also honeycomb cushions, which is mostly just the brand Supercore. But I'll go through each one basically. So air cushions, the most obvious example is going to be Rojo cushions, have some kind of an air cell structure. They have these air cells. Like I mentioned earlier, they can be contoured, meaning that different air cells are just going to be shorter. So when you sit in it, it's going to give you some kind of a contour to sit in. These are excellent for pressure sore relief. Arguably the best for pressure sore relief. Just because they're really, really great at redistributing people's body weight.
I just drove to Florida on that cushion and 22 hours in the car sitting nonstop, and felt comfortable the whole time. It really is a great cushion. One of the things that's really neat about this cushion is this one is a quattro. Okay, so Sam, if you brush that off a little bit and then spin it around, you'll see that there's a valve on it. Okay, so red and green. Right now it's pushed to red, and what that means is now the valve is closed, and so all four when you say quattro, that cushion is broken up into 4 sectors. So imagine like a diagram, right? And you get a cross in the middle, and there's 4 sectors. Okay, so there's 4 quadrants in that cushion of air cells, and all the air can flow in that quadrant, and in that quadrant, and in that quadrant, but only in that quadrant if the red is on. Okay, so right now it's pushed to red, and so the air will stay in each of the quadrants where they are.
Yeah,
okay,
so it's like
now
quadrants, quadrant here, quadrant here, quadrant here, quadrant here.
Yep. And so if you push it to green, then they can flow everywhere. Okay. And so why that's neat is so that, like, for instance, in my car, I get in my car and I push it to green. Okay. I sit comfortably where I want to be, like where the posture and in the back, so it's a little bit lower. And then I go ahead and lock it and push it to red. Now, if I lean forward, the air can't flow into the back. Okay. Because if you were just leave it on green, when you lean forward, the front cells are going to sink and the back cells are going to inflate and almost kind of push you out of your chair. Okay. So with this, you can lock and it almost creates a custom contour within itself and able to lock each cell in different amounts of air in them.
Now, how often do you have to refill it with air?
So that valve over on that side is the amount of air that's in the entire cushion, right? So if you would have to push it over to green so that they're all flowing, and then you can go ahead and literally you can just put your mouth on it, you can blow it, but it does come with a little pump, right?
So air cushions, definitely, as Andrew mentioned, the biggest drawback is they can cause imbalance because if you lean to one side, the air is going to shift to the other side and keep you going that way. And as you mentioned too, the way they've controlled that is by creating different compartments. You'll see them in the name. It's usually, they'll call it a Rojo single compartment cushion, meaning one big compartment. They also have Rojo dual compartment cushions, which is usually one side and the other side. And then there's Rojo Quattro, as you mentioned, where it's 4. And that's important to know because some people have different needs. For example, a lot of our customers are amputees, and amputees tend to really like Rojo cushions because they can deflate one side down to a certain preferred amount of air and then close the valve so that one side has a lot of air, the other side has a little air, because generally amputees lean on their amputeed side and they need something to correct that. A contoured cushion works great, but a Rojo cushion works as well by doing that, and people just love Rojo. A lot of people who get in one want to stay in it.
There is a possibility that they pop, right? They are air. Okay. If someone has cats, it's probably a problem. Seriously, if you have cats with claws, they will pop air cushions, right? And so that's something to really know and think, like literally ask, do you have a cat? Like you're gonna give them an air cushion because when they're in bed, their cat's gonna jump up on their wheelchair. But the really cool thing is Rojo has a patch kit that comes with every single cushion. Okay.
As we talked about, downsides, what Andrew mentioned, also expense, and also they're just really not great for people who have really, really, really low abdominal stability. So people who have to use a lot of lateral supports, or people who don't use lateral supports, but they just rely on a contoured cushion to keep them upright. You put them in a Rojo cushion, they've never used them before, they can feel really tippy in them, even the multi-compartment ones. Let's jump to foam, because we've been talking about it a lot. So foam cushions, there's a huge variety of foam cushions. It's probably the largest category because it's cheap. It's cheap to manufacture, cheap to sell. A lot of people sit on them, and they usually layer them. So you have different layers of foam that have different densities. So this top layer you can see is really nice and soft. This bottom layer is a lot firmer. They do that because then they can contour them and give you a firm supportive base. And the top layer is going to give you a little bit more pressure relief. So
and comfort.
Yeah, and comfort. So it's a lot easier to get an inexpensive foam cushion that does what you need it to do, and they work well and they're comfortable. And it includes, I mean, I should kind of say too, it includes basic inexpensive cushions, but there's also very advanced foam cushions. Not all foam cushions are cheap cushions. The big advantage to foam, and you'll see it in a lot of hybrid cushions, which we will talk about in a minute, is foam provides great rigidity, and foam is also very easy to modify. So if somebody gets a cushion, they're sitting in it, and they call their ATP and say, hey, I'm having problems, I'm leaning over to one side. The ATP can come out there and shave a piece off and fix the problem. You can't do that with gel or fluid or or air. So foam is very modifiable. That's why people tend to like that.
I don't want to go somewhere else with this, but one thing that I forgot to mention about the air, and it's just one kind of downside with it, is it can be hard to transfer onto air. Okay, low cushions can roll up as you get across. So what do we need to think about then is how good is the person's transfer? How much lift can they get? If they're light, real active, and they're like, oh, I just pop right over, and I get lots of lift. I don't drag across. I don't slowly move across or whatever. Now, if you're a little bigger and, you don't have as much strength or whatever it might be, and you drag across, you grab that real quick. When you go to drag across that thing, why don't you just show it? And in the corner will roll up on someone. See like that?
Okay.
And so then they're like, they're on it, but now it's folded up underneath them.
Yeah, and you get like this and you sit on that.
Yeah, or it's really the other way. It flips up and it's like that.
Yeah, well, this is really inflated right now. Here,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like this.
Yeah, and then they gotta try, and it's hard. It's hard, get that, especially you want to be totally independent, right?
Yeah.
You get up every morning, you got to get in this thing, you got to get in out of it every night. So,
that is more of a concern with high profile cushions too.
yeah, so it's not a big deal, but it's just another thing to know and have in your repertoire of how's your transfer.
So we went through foam, we talked about air. One more thing to say about foam. Generally not the best at pressure redistribution, and they can bottom out. So if you bottom out a foam cushion, it's just not the right cushion. You can't alter it. It's just the wrong cushion. So that's something to talk about with people is, have you ever used a foam cushion before, and what kind did you use, and what happened? Okay, so fluid and gel. If you guys remember the J2 cushion, that's a great example of a fluid cushion because it has a fluid-filled sac in it, and they have like a 9-oil blend. It's like KFC's 11 herbs and spices, but it's like a super secret thing that they have. But it's fluid cushions are almost, if not right up there with air at redistribution. They're great for pressure sores. They're great for people who have issues with sitting on bony prominences, and they're highly custom cushions. So big, long order forms that you can go through with someone to get them a great cushion that's very, very tailored to them. So fluid cushions are fantastic. Similar downside to air cushion, just expensive. A J2, J3 cushion, they're pricey, upwards of between $400 and $600, sometimes $700, $800, depending on what you get with it. So that's important to remember is people's budgets, but also
any issues with people popping them like air?
Oh yeah.
Yep. Okay,
People
same
thing. Exactly. That is one downside.
Okay.
Same thing, a cat or whatever. It's just it's a bag full of fluid, so you're like sitting on a silicone patch or whatever.
Right. Also, another kind of not often thought about downside to fluid is it's the heaviest cushion. It weighs more than pretty much everything else, and a lot of people are really concerned with shaving every ounce they can off of their wheelchair. So it's an important thing to let people know too. So this is a style called honeycomb. Supercore kind of flagships this style of cushion. These are great because they're extremely breathable. So this cushion is awesome at dispersing heat and moisture, and they're just easy to take care of. They're machine washable, but they can make these in any contour or any shape, and then they almost always layer them. So the different layers of honeycomb have different densities. This one real easy to press, good at distributing pressure. Bottom one is real thick, that gives you lots of good support. It's good for pressure sore people because a lot of times people, especially incontinent people, incontinence is a big concern with pressure sores. Urine really advances skin breakdown. So a cushion that can prevent heat and moisture as much as possible while also being able to redistribute your pressure is important.
These cushions feel stiff.
Yes.
Okay, they feel firm. They are a bit of a firm, but with firm come support.
Lastly, in cushion type, we'll talk about hybrid cushions. Hybrid cushion is literally just a combination of everything we just talked about, and you see it all over. So a really great example here is Rojo's Hybrid Elite. They use a combination of foam, gel, and air. So I don't know if this is gel, but I know they do make it with gel. And their foam gives you great posturing. This would be where you'd sit. The rear end would be here, and your legs would come up front here. So this is that coccyx relief pad. This is kind of a larger example. Sometimes they're as small as that, where it gives you that great pressure distribution in an area where somebody is likely to get it. But it also gives you really good posturing here along your femurs. And then it gives you a nice gel pad in the front. So it can, your legs can sit in it really nicely. And if people have alignment issues where one leg kind of kicks off or something, that it aligns it really nice out towards the front. So here's a great example of a cushion that does a lot, but is also accessible to a lot of different kinds of people. Cover types. Cover types are a lot more important than you think. The cover that you pick on a cushion usually comes in three options. There's a standard stretch cover, which is usually the main option that has no cost added. It usually comes for free. And then there's usually an air exchange cover offered. And there's usually a waterproof cover that's offered. And the difference between those is the standard stretch covers are usually best for shearing. Remember, we talked about shearing. I can show you right here. This right here is a standard stretch cover. You can feel it wrinkles easily. It stretches very easily. So if my skin goes against that, the material is going to stretch. My skin isn't going to stretch. And then air exchange cover, which looks something like this. We don't have a great example of an air exchange cover, but it usually looks like a very breathable cover. A lot of people, that's the number one thing. They say, "Oh, my cushion gets so hot underneath me every day. I want something that's breathable." Especially people who live in San Diego, or
depending Florida, on where they live too.
Incontinence covers, we talked about it, but like urine greatly advances pressure sores. If you have urine on your skin, it greatly advances pressure sores. So if you urinate and you can't properly clean your cushion, every time you get wet, you get it wet, it's going to mix with the urine that's in your cushion, and it's going to raise the acidity of the moisture that's against your skin and cause pressure sores. So incontinence covers are for people obviously like that. You'll hear each one of these is called something different with every brand, but usually it's some form of those words, waterproof or incontinence or whatever. But you can do your own research there, and now that you know the basis of it. There's a lot of cushions that have special support kind of built within them. I don't even think we have any examples, but I'll go through it a little bit. So you'll see a lot of words in the option sets of cushions like anti-thrust and wedge and like sacral cutouts and pommel. And really all that means is that it's the cushion has a built-in feature that is self-correcting people's postural issues. An anti-thrust means that it's going to have some kind of a plane lowering of the rear of the cushion. So meaning it's going to take the whole cushion, let's say this is the front, this is the back, and it's going to cut it in half. Then this whole section is going to be lowered a little bit. This is for people who have posture where they're sitting like this. It brings them back down and they're sitting forward again. Pretty much any time I've ever had to get an anti-thrust cushion for someone, they knew that they needed it. They're like, yeah, my PT says I have to have anti-thrust. The next one is wedge. So a wedge is something that you don't see too often because all it really does is affects the dump of the seat. So it raises the front, lowers the rear. And most people are able to do that by adjusting their wheelchair. So some people prefer a wedge cushion, but it is a less common postural support.
He said most people adjust the chair so that the cushion is just right. Well, if your chair no longer has that adjustment to get where you want it to go, then you could add a wedge underneath a cushion.
The next one is kind of hard to describe, so I'll show you here. It's called a pommel. And if you see here, it's just like a foam pad that goes between the knees and the front of the seat. I'd say most of the time that's for people with cerebral palsy who have issues of their knees pressing together. So that's just something that aligns the legs apart. Because normally a contour and a cushion though it does give you some postural support, it isn't enough to keep your knees together. A lot of times it does a much better job at keeping your knees from splaying out than it does from pushing together. Sacral cutout, we talked about those. That's the sacrum is right in the back here. It's just a cutout. Hybrid cushions have offerings to put air pockets in there or gel pockets in there. There's also amputee cushions, which is going to be cushions that are specifically made for amputees. Come in all different shapes and sizes. And then there's non-standard cushions. So a lot of different cushion companies make cushions for all different kinds of chairs. And one great example of that is commode cushions. So you'll see Roho will make these Roho cell pads, but they'll make them in the shape of a toilet seat so that you can put it on top of a commode. And it usually has some kind of a strap that goes around the seats that doesn't fall off when you transfer onto it and get all the yucky. So one final note about that. You get a lot of, so as far as pressure sores are concerned and choosing the right cushion, and even adding on to what Andrew said, everybody has a different combination of risk factors in their life, and some people only have a couple risk factors to pressure sores, but they still get one because they are in that zone, or like maybe their risk factor, they aren't incontinent, they're very active, but they just sit for a long time because they have an office job. And they don't have quite the right cushion. They can get a pressure sore. Whereas on the other hand, you might have somebody who's really, really, really prone to pressure sores. When I worked in nursing, I had people who were at high risk for pressure sores. So we had to be careful, like with what you were saying. I couldn't have, I had to shift. I had one woman, obviously I won't say her name because of HIPAA, but I had to shift her on the toilet every 30 to 45 seconds. Because if she sat for too long, her skin would break down. She was very, very, very prone to pressure sores, and she had tons of different risks that were stacking. So she was incontinent. She was elderly, very elderly. She had very brittle skin. She had a slew of positioning devices on her wheelchair that pressed into her, and each one we had to make sure was fitting her just perfect. So, moral of that story is you have to. It's good to really ask people a lot of questions.
Yeah, learn your customer.
And people appreciate that too. They really like being able to say their piece and talk to you about what their problem is and what they're going through and what their situation is, instead of having a salesman just cram 4 expensive cushions down their throat. So that's important. But another part of that too is learning this terminology. Asking the questions, have you ever struggled with incontinence before? That's way more relevant and that's way more professional than saying, has pee ever touched your skin? Because the people who are going through this stuff know the terminology because they hear it from their doctors and PTs all day.
Yeah, and when I went through my spinal cord injury, I think I was counting at one point, and I had 38 different physical therapists.
Oh my God!
In about a year and a half.
That's wild.
I went on quite an adventure, but they will learn a lot. You really kind of just need to guide them. All of our customers are pretty educated.
Otherwise, that is it.